Hello, and welcome to the Plastic Surgery Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Allison Warner, and in this episode, I'm joined by my co-host, Carrie Stevens. As many of you know, your patients are spending significant money on skincare. Industry analysis pegs consumer spending globally on skincare between 90 to 107 billion. That's billion with a B. That's a lot of money. You spend so much time developing a relationship with your patients. They trust you to tell them what is the best surgical and non-surgical procedures to get the aesthetic results they want. Thus, they are going to trust your advice on skincare products, and you in turn can benefit from selling those products in your practice. Incorporating retail products into your plastic surgery practice can be a huge boost. Not only can it bring in more revenue, but it can also increase patient satisfaction and facilitate a long-term relationship with them. As practice consultant Terry Ross wrote for us earlier this year, the key to a successful retail program is to focus on products that complement your surgical procedures or services or treatments. So with this in mind, we're going to talk to a number of people behind retail skincare brands that cater to plastic surgery practices over the coming season. To get started, we have with us on this episode Leah Garcia and Dr. Felipe Jimenez of Nulastin. Leah is the founder and owner of Nulastin, a hair care brand focused on promoting natural hair growth with less shedding using the brand's patented Elastaplex technology. Dr. Jimenez is the company's chief science officer and leads R&D and product innovation at the company. In this episode, they talk to us about the company, its products, and why plastic surgeons should be talking to their patients about hair care, and how this can be a huge piece in ensuring patients are satisfied with their outcomes. Here's our conversation. Leah and Dr. Jimenez, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you both for having us. This is great.
Yeah, we're looking forward to this conversation. So to start, our audience is plastic surgeons, as I said, but I'm curious to know, what should they know about hair loss? Let's start there, because I'm sure there are a lot who don't really know the role they could play here. But what do they need to know about hair loss?
I'll pass the baton to Felipe.
Now, thank you so much for that question. And it's a really good question, right? Because we hear a lot about hair loss out there. We hear about all the different factors that can cause hair loss, anywhere from hormonal changes to stress and things like that, right? But a lot of times we lose sight of the fact that if we don't have a good root system at the base of that follicle, that we can get premature shedding as well, right? So what we do here at Nulastin is not only focus on the healthy growth of hair, but also the healthy growth and maintenance of that root system as well.
I'd like to just take this from a female perspective. In a plastic surgery practice, the humans that come into that practice are chasing an aesthetic. They're chasing to look better, to feel better, to repair damage, to enhance perhaps what they have or what they don't have. For me, when I think about Elastin and also what Nulastin, we as a company and a brand have, the synergy is so aligned with what is in a plastic surgery practice. And the hair component is huge. It's huge because if you take a human's hair away, a man, a woman, whomever, that immediately changes their confidence. It changes how they feel about themselves, and they will be chasing restoration for that. So if they have it in a plastic surgery practice, you're ahead of having that individual go elsewhere, either to a dermatology clinic and or some other practice to try to rectify what I truly believe can be handled at a bit of a one-stop shop.
I know you mentioned the hormonal hair loss. I know for me, when I had kids, I definitely personally experienced hormonal hair loss, where I always had really thick hair, and then 4 months postpartum, I lost a ton. But it's interesting, the plastic surgery angle of this. Do you think most plastic surgeons do have products that address hair thinning in their office?
I think that if they've got an aesthetic component, which most do, I mean, most of the plastic surgery offices I've ever walked into typically have your other product line. They have their aesthetic, where you're handling your injections and your fillers and that part of it. I rarely have ever seen a plastic surgery office that doesn't have that extra component. So they have it, but do they have what's effective is the better question.
Yeah, correct. And again, just going back to what Leah was saying before, hair, is a huge component of who you are, right? Your personality, what you look like, right? And so, I think of it like this, right? So if I were to walk into a plastic surgery office, right, and I have Botox done, or let's say that I have a chemical peel done, laser resurfacing, a lift done, right? But if I go back home, right, after all of this is done, and I've got this beautiful skin, and it's nice and tight and all that, and I've got these really sparse, brows, or I don't have any eyelashes whatsoever, or maybe, I'm shedding hair, from my scalp, I'm not going to feel like it's a complete, sort of transformation, if you will, right? And so, I think that, going back to back when we had, those extreme makeover shows and all of that, I think it's the same sort of thing, right? I think that part of the facial feature, is going to be the hair, right? The hair component, whether it's the brow, the lash, or even the hair. And so it's going to be really important to give patients, a full makeover, if you will, right? It's not just about the skin. It's about everything else that accessorizes the skin, if you will.
Carrie mentioned there about, her hair thinning after pregnancy. I know for me, I had COVID and I had hair loss with that. Can you talk a little bit more for those plastic surgeons who don't know or aren't that up on it? Like, what are some of the causes for hair loss or hair thinning?
Well, there's a lot of different causes out there, and you mentioned COVID, right? I think with COVID, it isn't quite known, exactly what the mechanism of action is there, what caused the hair shedding. Obviously, I want to think that maybe it was just all the stress around, COVID and all of that, everything shutting down, not being able to go out and interact with people anymore, right? But it really isn't known, at this point what the exact mechanism of action is. But, as we said before, there are hormonal changes that can definitely cause, hair loss. Stress can be a huge one. As there's plenty of products out there on the market that are geared towards stress, whether they're oral supplements or whatever it is, right, to try to lower your stress level and try to help, that way. The hormonal changes, you think about, products out there that, look to lower the level of certain hormones, especially, in guys. There's this huge market out there, of products that deal with a certain hormone in the skin and the scalp, that at higher levels can definitely cause hair loss as well. And again, I think that the one that's been forgotten, or overlooked is really just not having a good root system, right? It's much like a tree, right? If the tree grows really tall, really fast, but doesn't have a very good root system, boy, that thing is going to topple over really quick, right? Because it doesn't have the root system to hold it up, right? So it's the same thing with hair, right? So the longer that hair gets, right, the bigger the root system, that you need to be able to support that extra weight there.
So I guess that probably goes into my next question, because I was going to ask you about the technology within Nulastin, which is this Elastaplex, and how does it contribute to rejuvenating the hair follicles, which I think is what you're getting to there, and promoting kind of the healthy. I mean, you have products for lashes, for brows, and for hair. So how does that all work to build that root system?
First, the Elastaplex technology that we have, it represents a synergistic blend of ingredients specifically engineered to support the body's natural metabolic processes to replenish elastin. If you think about Nulastin, our company, it is literally that we are supporting the natural metabolic process to replenish elastin. Now, in medical journals and in derm journals, there is very little, if zero, imagery and information on the elastin root system that Felipe is referring to. And there are some obscure published articles, but you would have to dig very, very deep, and you'd have to be obsessed like we are with elastin to find those articles. They exist. And so what Felipe has rediscovered is the importance, really the vital component of this elastin envelope that is at the base of every hair follicle. So think of it, when Felipe talked about the root system, the actual envelope, it bear hugs every follicle. Without that support, that network, your follicle will shed prematurely. It's not going to have an ability to anchor itself. This is the primary differentiator with elastin and with our science and with our Elastaplex technology. Now, we don't just stop at anchoring the hair. Once you anchor the hair, you're going to allow it to grow longer and stronger. And we can actually assist with that because we have 5 active ingredients in our formulation that address all of the stages of the hair growth cycle. So we want that first anagen stage to really pop. Then you want that catagen stage. You want that one kind of slow down at the same time so that you can keep your hair longer. And then once everything starts redeveloping the telogen and the late telogen stage, that's when you want things to kick back in again. But if you don't have the anchor, none of those other products that are out there on the market are going to have the same effectiveness as what you're going to get with our Elastaplex technology and what you're going to get with our Nulastin product. It's really revolutionary science, and I know that doctors will hear that a lot, but there is no other company out there in our space that is addressing this loss of elastin at the level that we are.
Absolutely, and if you think about it, a lot of women, and I'll tell you this from firsthand experience, both Leah and I were at our clinical study, endpoint last week. And one of the things that we were hearing from, all of the study volunteers was that after using our product, right, especially on the scalp, right, whenever they would go and take a shower or whatever, they were picking up a lot less hair, from their tub than they were before they actually started using the product. And so, overwhelmingly what we heard from them was the fact that it helps to anchor the hair, right, so that it prevents the premature shedding of the hair, right? So, and again, it doesn't matter whether you're washing your hair or you're brushing your hair, whatever that is, right? It's going to help to anchor it. So I love what Leah always says, right? It should hurt to pull out your hair, whether it's, your hair on the scalp or a brow or even an eyelash, right? It should hurt because if it's not truly anchored onto the skin well enough, right, it's just going to pop out and you're not even going to feel it, right? You definitely don't want that. It's got to hurt, right? Because that's what tells you that you've got that good root system.
Pulling your hair should hurt. Pulling your hair out should hurt. That'll be our tagline.
You know what? And that's actually a good way to help people understand because it's making me understand some things about my own hair that I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Me too.
Right? When you pluck those eyebrows, if you don't say ouch, something is wrong.
You're absolutely right. I'm realizing.
Right? Think about it. When a little girl is getting her hair combed or a little boy, they're in pain whenever mama combs their hair and it hurts. They're like, ow, ow, ow. And that's for a reason because they've got healthy elastin. Elastin is produced in the body naturally until about the age of 20, 21. So after that age, it starts diminishing and naturally your body will not continue producing elastin. And I think that it's important since our audience in the plastic surgery space will be very well versed on collagen and elastin. I don't doubt that at all. What I question is whether or not they really understand the source of elastin that has an efficacious effect on the human body to support its ability to produce more. So botanicals, those are marketing. Any of the elastin that may come across in the form of, and Felipe can help me with this, but the elastin that may be from tendons and ligaments from animal sources, number one, those are questionable in terms of ethics. But once you boil a protein, anybody knows it denatures. But even peptides are different in the mechanism than what we are providing here with our DNA, our recombinant DNA protein that is also combined with a few other DNA proteins, including a human keratin. But Felipe, if you can just highlight, in my opinion, the importance of what our 746 amino acid protein has that even the peptides don't.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a lot of people ask us, what really differentiates your product from everybody else's, right? And, obviously we like to talk about the elastin and whatnot, right? But what are the ingredients that are different, right, in our products? And Leah just mentioned one, and this is really the star, I would say, of our product, right? It's called tropoelastin, right? So tropoelastin is what people talk about as the precursor of elastic fibers. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that to make an elastic fiber, you need to have a collection of all of these tropoelastin proteins that are cross-linked together, right, to create this big giant polymer, right, that we refer to as an elastic fiber. Okay, and as we talked about before, elastic fibers play, a lot of different roles, whether in the skin, keeping the skin nice and taut and elastic, but it also helps to anchor the hair follicle as well, right? Now, the biggest difference is that we're the only company really that uses that big giant tropoelastin protein, right? Because we know that it does two things for us, right? So it helps to replenish that elastin right at the base of that follicle, and at the same time, it also helps to turn on certain machinery within the cells to make healthy new elastin there as well, right? Because making elastin isn't just about making the protein, right? So there's a lot more involved there. There's processing involved, there's cross-linking involved. So there's all this machinery that needs to be turned on, right? And that's what the tropoelastin is there to do. And that's really what sets us apart from every other company, right? Leah mentioned, things like elastin that comes from ligaments and things like that. But my favorite one is, elastin that comes from fish or marine elastin, right? There's no such thing as marine elastin. Elastin is specific to mammals, right? So you can't really get elastin from any other animals or fish out there for sure. So, we're using the real thing. It is human tropoelastin. No, we don't get it from animals. We get it from cells. So we actually use what's called a recombinant protein, meaning that you take these cells and you clone them to make tropoelastin. So in effect, we're using cells as sort of our manufacturing facilities to make this new protein. So that's really the biggest thing, right? And there's other recombinant proteins that we also use in the formula, but I think that the star is definitely going to be tropoelastin. I think the other one is definitely going to be human keratin, right? Why do we need human keratin there? Well, our hair, the hair shaft is actually made up of keratin, right? So if we can provide the skin, the scalp, with keratin, it can take that keratin and actually make the hair shaft, right? So again, to Leah's point, we don't just focus on one area of hair growth, but we look at the entire metabolism of making new hair, right? It's not just enough to keep your follicles in the anagen phase, the growth phase, right? If you don't give it, all of the other nutrients that it needs to actually build hair and support the root system as well, right? So that's really what sets us apart from other companies out there.
Felipe, I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your background and kind of the research background you come into working with Nulastin and this Elastaplex technology.
I've got a long history with elastin, and I think that the reason why I was so drawn to Nulastin is certainly working with Leah. I mean, aside from the fact that Leah is just an amazing person, and I just, I wanted to work with her as well. But the fact that, we're focusing here on elastin was really, the reason why I came to Nulastin. And my role so far has been varied. Number one, I can't take credit for developing the formulas that are out there in the marketplace because those existed before I ever came to Nulastin. But what I did bring to the table was figuring out the actual mechanism of action of how our products work. And knowing that will allow us to make newer and more effective, formulas going forward, right? And, one of the things that we worked on early on and we continue to work on is developing our own patented blends of ingredients that will sort of carry what we've already done, sort of to the next level. So that's really, what I bring to the table. Now, the other thing I think that Leah mentioned was the fact that, we understood that there is this elastin envelope at the base of the follicle, right? And the reason that I know that is twofold. So number one, years ago, when I was still a researcher, a basic science researcher, we did a study whereby we took these punch biopsies and we injected them with these peptides that actually would cause elastin to grow, right? Well, upon doing these histologies meaning that you take sections of these biopsies and you look at them under a microscope, we saw that these little elastic fibers were actually growing around the base of the follicle. And we thought, well, wait a second, that's not really in the literature. How is this happening? And sure enough, the more we did this with different biopsies, we saw the exact same thing. So I went to the literature and, I tried to find any even obscure journal articles, showing this. And sure enough, I was able to find reputable journal article that actually showed this in not just a punch biopsy that was treated with something, but just a punch biopsy itself of just a normal follicle. And sure enough, there's an elastin envelope there, right? So, when I came to Nulastin, I said, oh my God, I said, you're using tropoelastin, right, to replenish elastin in skin and in hair follicles. Well, guess what? You're really helping out that root system, right? And that was sort of that big aha moment, of how the products work, right? It wasn't just providing those ingredients, right, that necessary to help, with normal hair growth, but it's also providing the necessary nutrients to help to really strengthen that elastin root system at the base of the follicle.
It's interesting when I hear this story because I always think, oh, we were floundering knowing that we had this amazing product and we didn't know why, but we kind of did know why. The original formulation was designed, the original formulator had been, he worked for Amgen, and so he came with tissue regeneration experience. And so his whole background was in wound healing. And then when you look at Felipe, what he has brought, and this I think is important to plastic surgery practices, because what we're offering here isn't just another cosmetic ingredient. Felipe, for example, had worked with the Obagi brand, and many plastic surgery practices right now are using that brand. As a matter of fact, Felipe sold his company, NB Medical, to Allergan. So there's that connection there as well. And then it continues from there because when Felipe was working, as he was saying, as a chemist for KDC1 Benchmark Cosmetic Lab, many of those products have also been carried over into the professional space. So what's really fascinating as a direct-to-consumer company, we haven't branched out into the plastic surgery and or the medical space. And I haven't done that mainly because I spearheaded the company in 2016. I bootstrapped everything because I knew I had a winner product, but I didn't have everything ready, in my humble opinion, to go into the medical space until now. And now I am ready. I am ready because our formulation has been up leveled thanks to Felipe. We've recently just made it so that the scalability is there. And there is a possibility that we would be open to some private label experiences. So, but right now we have there is an opportunity for a practice to somewhat have the corner of the market in our elastin space for hair care. But let us not forget, we have an amazing skincare collection too that is second to none. If you are looking to repair after any surgery, again, everything was based on wound healing technology and tissue regeneration. So the elastin that we use and we couple it with some amino acids with antioxidant and anti-carcinogen properties that really catapult it. And since someone was saying anecdotal evidence, a really good friend of mine went to LA. She had one of those very expensive facelifts, the ones where you go in the back door and then you stay for days and you pay hundreds of thousands of dollars and you get pampered. Well, she was offered many products upon leaving to help with her skincare repair, and she came back to Nulastin.
Well, actually, I was going to ask you if you could kind of break down the products that you have on offer, because I know at the beginning I mentioned that you have a lash, brow, and hair line that specifically has this Elastaplex technology. But if you could break down those products and then also
maybe talk a little bit more in depth about the skincare products. What can plastic surgery practices expect from the company on that regard?
Well, we kind of use the KISS method here. We didn't need to get very complicated because what we have is really effective and it's a simple process. So we've got an eyelash, a follicle fortifying serum, an eyebrow shape altering serum. We have a hair product, which is the Vibrant Scalp Treatment, all topical. And then we have a skincare line, which is cleanse, hydrate, moisturize. And everything is based on this elastin science and our Elastaplex technology. The eyelash and the eyebrow are our heroes because you have demonstrable results very quickly. We, as Felipe mentioned, we just finished our most recent 12-week clinical evaluation. And from 0 to 6 weeks, we had great results. But from 6 weeks to 12 weeks, it was like a rocket ship had gone into the afterburner mode. What we saw from 6 weeks to 12 weeks was nothing short of miraculous. Women came in and looked like they'd had a transformation. They at times with their brows and their lashes, they looked like different people. That was really encouraging to see. The hair care study also, we saw great results, but hair is tenacious. It grows at the pace of hair. We accelerate it ever so slightly, but it takes time. And so I say that people should give hair at least 16 weeks and even longer because ongoing use of the product then continues supporting the anchoring of the hair follicle. So you lose less, you grow more, and you get thicker naturally. And that's really the gist of it. The skincare line, it's a beautiful addition. The packaging is gorgeous. It's made for a spa. So when you put it on the shelf, it will almost sell itself.
Get back into you, Leah. Can you talk about your backstory and just what led you to start this company?
I don't like to sleep. Thought, wouldn't it be fun to spend 5 or 6 years without sleep and start a company? Actually, I grew up on a ranch, and so I had my share of bumps and bruises growing up. But I transitioned to a professional athlete, and as a professional athlete, I raced mountain bikes all over the world. But that's when I was really introduced to performance products. I can tell you more about Epogen and human growth hormone than probably any of my colleagues in the beauty space. And not that I ever did those, but I can tell you why I can identify them. But the biggest, there were a couple of transitions that happened in my life and the hard knocks that happened along the way. The first being in my late 20s, I suffered Bell's palsy, Bell's paralysis from stress. At the time, I was going pretty fast in the hospitality industry, and my face just quit working one day. And that was a big transition to realizing the importance of being able to smile, being able to look normal. But it taught me a lot of really great lessons as I identify very intimately with a lot of my clients. So I coupled what had happened to me in my experience with my performance based education from being a professional athlete. And so I was drawn to science based products. I'd been using Dr. Barry Sears. You remember Dr. Barry Sears, the Zone Diet? I wrote a fitness chapter for one of his books, but I was very much into anti-inflammation, and he had a skincare product that was based on burn victims. I had used that prior to using the technology that I use now. I've never been one to walk into a cosmetic store and grab something off the shelf. I've always chased science-based skincare. So when I met my original formulator and I found out that there was a product with elastin, and I immediately got it. I got it so quickly that I said, sign me up. I actually invested in an earlier company that was trying to launch to the plastic surgery and the cosmetic world. That did not last very long. And then a couple of years later, I said, well, I'll just take this to market. And that's what I did. I brought it to market because literally, if it works for me, it will work for anybody. And when I say I've had my fair share of hard knocks, we're talking every bump and bruise you could ever imagine. And also, I transitioned to a life of a sideline reporter for the Professional Bull Rider Tour on CBS. So I was a sideline reporter for 18 years, traveling every weekend, again, not sleeping. But I've seen doctors in practice. We had a surgeon at all of our events working on cowboys whenever they'd get injured in the arena. But it was really an interesting transition. But let me tell you, if you're in front of a high definition camera, as I was growing older, you'll dig deep into whatever arsenal you can find to stay better looking, because and unfortunately, men can grow older as reporters and look fabulously handsome, but the same is not true for we women counterparts. There comes a point in time where we expire for what is customarily accepted on camera. I hate to say that, but it's quite true. So I was eventually put out to pasture, and here I am.
And here you are. Well, I guess our final question would be, what's your advice to plastic surgeons who are talking to patients, who want to talk to their patients about hair loss, or who aren't sure about approaching the subject? What should they be saying to them?
I have my opinions. Let me just say, if it were me, if I had walked into the office and if they were helping me with whatever I may need, I don't, let's just say it's a bleph. Let's say it's a lift. Let's say whatever I may be doing. What they should be talking about is the whole package. What they want to do is ensure that their clients, their patients, when they get done with their procedure, they've got tools so that they can carry out what they intended to get in the first place. And it should not just stop with the procedure. It should continue with home care. And if they don't have the proper home care based on science that has an efficacious effect that actually is demonstrable that they can see results from, then they're shortchanging that patient. So for me, what I'd want them to do is address not just what's happening in office, but the take home. And the take home should not just stop with the skin and with what procedure they just had, and it should continue on with beautiful hair, lashes, and brows. Felipe, do you have thoughts on that?
I would echo what you just said as well, but I would also add one other thing. You mentioned earlier, Leah, that elastin is also really important. When you're talking about wound healing, and wound cosmesis and things like that. And it made me remember, a study that we did years and years ago, where by turning on elastin production in skin, we were actually able to, appreciate better wound cosmesis. In other words, we were able to reduce the amount of scarring, right, in wounds, right, by simply turning on elastin. And, what we reasoned back then was the fact that, people that tend to get keloid scars will actually produce tissue that is mostly collagen, right? So it's not a combination of elastin and collagen and cells and all that. It's just collagen, right? So that's why they get the keloid scars, right? And so I went back to that, and I was thinking about that, and I would just say, just to give a shout out to our skincare products, that it might not be a bad idea, for our plastic surgeons to also maybe think about, using our products, pre and post surgery, to be able to help with the elastin production and certainly help to balance out, that new tissue production after surgery.
Oh my gosh, bingo. So instead of just arnica, which every surgeon will say, you need to start taking arnica like however many weeks ahead of your surgery. Yes, please start with your elastin replenishment prior to your surgery as well.
We want to thank both of you for your time today. It's been really informative, and we really enjoyed kind of getting a little more in depth on the kind of the science here, and what, and helping doctors understand that, hair loss, hair thinning, but is an issue, but also having that complete package. So when a patient walks out of your office after their procedure, you're supporting them, with that, they say, what is it? The brows shape, frame the face, the hair frames the face. So if you're going to have a procedure there, you're going to want to make sure those things are keeping up with everything. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
How fun. Thank you both.
No, thank you.
As always, thank you for joining us, and be sure to subscribe to the Plastic Surgery Practice podcast to keep up with the latest episodes. And also, please check out plasticsurgerypractice.com for the latest industry news. Until next time, take care.